The year was 2094. Earth had changed a lot in the last few decades. Cities were brighter, taller, and more crowded. Technology was everywhere. People traveled in flying pods, spoke to holograms, and even had robots doing their house chores. But with all that progress came one dangerous habit. Humanity had stopped listening. The world had learned to ignore warnings. It all started on a cold January night when a young astronomer named Dr. Adrian Holt sat alone in the observatory of the United Earth Agency. He was a quiet man, the kind who liked to spend nights staring at stars rather than talking to people. The observatory around him was silent except for the soft hum of machines and the faint crackle of a radio receiver. He had been working for weeks on decoding strange signals that the agency's satellites had picked up from deep space. At first he thought they were just natural cosmic waves, background noise. But something about the rhythm of these signals bothered him. They repeated, every 6 hours like clockwork, too precise to be random. One evening as he adjusted the signal receiver, his screen flickered. A new sequence appeared, shorter, faster, more structured. Adrian leaned closer, typing commands rapidly. He separated the data layers, ran them through his decoding software, and suddenly froze. The signal wasn't just repeating random patterns when it was counting down. He stared at the monitor, his heart thudding. 10, 9, 8, then it stopped at 7 and restarted again. He immediately contacted his supervisor, Dr. Marin Joe, and showed her the recordings. Within hours, the news reached the central headquarters of the United Earth Agency in Geneva. At first, everyone dismissed it as a system glitch. But when other observatories in Russia, Japan, and Chile reported the same countdown sequence, the mood changed. Something, or someone, was sending the same signal to Earth from deep space. Meetings began. Experts from around the world gathered in closed rooms debating what to do. Some said it was a natural pulsar effect, others feared it was a message. A few scientists whispered what everyone else was afraid to say. Maybe it wasn't from nature at all. Maybe it was intelligent. The governments wanted silence. Do not alarm the public, they ordered. We must confirm the source first. But inside those hidden rooms, fear spread faster than any official statement could control. The countdown was still repeating. Nobody knew what it was counting down to. Adrian couldn't sleep. Night after night, he watched the signal cycle through the numbers. He started recording each pattern manually, hoping to find meaning. That's when he noticed another layer, faint, almost buried in the noise. It was a second signal, hidden beneath the countdown. He cleaned the data and ran it again. This time, the message became clearer. It wasn't random code. It was a string of coordinates. When he plotted them on the map, his chest tightened. The coordinates pointed straight to Earth. Adrian immediately informed the board. They analyzed the data, confirmed his findings, and finally admitted the unthinkable. The signal was targeted directly at the planet. A message from space aimed at Earth, repeating every few hours. It didn't take long before rumors began to leak. Scientists whispered to journalists, and soon online forums buzzed with conspiracy theories. Some claimed aliens were coming. Others said it was a government experiment gone wrong. The world, already restless with political and environmental tension, suddenly turned its eyes to the sky. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the signal changed. It sped up, each cycle shorter than the last, as if time was running out. The countdown was no longer in weeks. It was now in days. The United Earth Council called an emergency meeting. Leaders of all major nations attended virtually. In a secure room in Geneva, under the heavy glow of screens showing the shifting signal, President Ana Rivera of the Global Coalition stood and made a decision. We will send a reply. It took 48 hours to prepare the response. A multilingual signal was broadcast from Earth's largest communication array, coded in mathematical sequences, the universal language of science. The message was simple: identify yourself. What do you want? Then came silence. For days, no reply, no shift in the signal, nothing. Scientists checked and rechecked the systems, sure that the message hadn't gone through. But deep inside, Adrian felt something different. The silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like waiting. As the countdown ticked on, governments began preparing for the worst. Defense satellites were moved into position. The global fleet was put on standby and media outlets were ordered to stay quiet. The public was told nothing, but they could feel it. The tension in the air, the uncertainty. Across the world, strange things began to happen. Pilots reported seeing flashes of light beyond the upper atmosphere. Communication lines sometimes picked up strange interference that resembled whispering static. Even animals began acting differently. Birds flew in disoriented flocks. Whales changed their migration routes, and magnetic compasses flickered wildly. People didn't know what was coming, but everyone felt something was. Adrian spent his night staring at the signal. Each passing minute felt heavier. He thought about what the message could mean. A warning, a test? Or maybe a final notice, an ultimatum humanity had failed to understand. He tried to send another message, begging for a response. If you can hear us, please explain. We don't understand. But nothing came back. As the countdown neared its final day, the world grew restless. Streets filled with protests demanding the truth. Some people prayed, others panicked. Governments issued vague statements about astronomical phenomena and routine defense measures. But by now, no one believed them. Then came the night before the countdown was expected to end. The observatories were manned by teams of scientists, all watching the same flickering number on their screens. 3, 2, 1. Adrian's heart pounded. He had been awake for over 30 hours. Every telescope was pointed at the sky, every radio dish tuned to the same frequency. He whispered quietly to himself, "If this is it, just let it be quick." And then, the signal stopped. The screens went black. The data feeds went silent. No static, no interference, nothing. For a moment, no one spoke. Then chaos erupted. People shouted across the control room. Systems were rebooted. Backup satellites were checked. But there was no signal anymore. It was gone, as if it had never existed. In the following hours, the world waited for something to happen. A light in the sky, a meteor, an explosion, anything. But nothing came. Day turned to night, and still nothing. The global media eventually broke the story, calling it the Great Cosmic Hoax. Experts came forward claiming it was a system error, a misread from overlapping radio waves. Politicians quickly agreed, eager to move past the scare. Humanity breathed a sigh of relief, convincing itself that the universe hadn't noticed them after all. Adrian didn't believe that. He couldn't. Deep down, something inside him whispered that this wasn't over. The silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like judgment. Weeks went by and everyone moved on. The news faded. Life returned to normal. But one quiet evening, while reviewing archived satellite data, Adrian noticed something he had missed before. In the final seconds before the signal disappeared, there was a single blip, a pattern too brief for anyone to catch at first. He zoomed in, isolated the frame, and stared at it in disbelief. It wasn't random. It was a shape, a circle, and within it, 9 dots, 9 objects arranged in formation, moving steadily toward the solar system. He leaned back in his chair, eyes wide with dread. It wasn't over. The countdown hadn't ended because time ran out. It ended because whatever had sent it was already on its way. Adrian sat in silence, the glow of his monitor reflecting in his tired eyes. The hum of the observatory filled the air once more. Somewhere out there, beyond the black curtain of space, something had made its move, and Earth, blind, proud, and divided, had just ignored its final warning. Weeks passed after the strange countdown ended and the world began to breathe again. News channels moved on to other stories: politics, sports, celebrity scandals. People started laughing about the alien signal scare that had gripped the planet for a month. Late-night talk shows made jokes about it, and conspiracy forums slowly went quiet. But Dr. Adrian Holt couldn't move on. Every night he went back to the observatory, staring at the silent monitors, hoping the signal would return. The room that once buzzed with tension now felt empty. The radio receivers hummed quietly, waiting for a voice that never came. He replayed the last data transmission over and over, focusing on the 9 faint dots he had found. He'd even printed an image of them, a formation drifting in space near Neptune's orbit. He pinned it to the board above his desk, staring at it whenever he felt lost. Everyone else had given up. But Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. He began reaching out to his contacts across other observatories, scientists he trusted. Most didn't want to talk about it anymore. Some were afraid their funding would be cut if they kept pushing. "The world's moved on, Adrian," one old colleague told him. "Don't ruin your career chasing ghosts." But one person didn't laugh. Captain Elena Vaughn, a communications officer stationed aboard the orbital defense station Horizon. She had seen something strange in the outer planetary scans. Gravitational shifts, small but consistent, around Neptune's orbit. Adrian listened carefully as her voice came through the encrypted line. "It's like something massive is moving out there," she said quietly. "Not a rock, not debris, something organized." He felt a chill crawl up his spine. The 9 dots. Elena said she had reported it to Fleet Command, but they told her it was instrumental noise. She didn't believe that. Neither did Adrian. The next day, Adrian took a risk. He compiled the old signal data with the new gravitational readings and sent a full report to the United Earth Defense Council. He begged them to check the Ninth Fleet, Earth's largest space defense group stationed near Neptune. The response came 2 days later, short, cold, and dismissive. "No verified threats detected. Maintain silence." End of correspondence. That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He looked up at the stars through the observatory's glass dome and whispered, "Why won't they listen?" Meanwhile, far beyond what human eyes could see, something vast moved through the darkness. Slow, steady, and deliberate. In the coming weeks, rumors began spreading within the military. Low-ranking officers whispered that the Ninth Fleet's communications were becoming unstable. Some claimed entire patrol units were missing, but none of it reached the public. Officially, everything was fine. Then, one morning, Earth Command made a quiet announcement. Routine communication outage with the Ninth Fleet due to solar interference. No one outside the defense network cared. Space blackouts weren't new. People forgot about it within hours. But Adrian didn't. He watched the timing of the blackout. It matched perfectly with the coordinates of the 9 objects he had tracked. He knew this wasn't random. He called Elena again, but this time there was no reply. Her line went dead. A week later, news came through unofficial channels that Horizon had gone dark. Total loss of contact. Adrian felt his stomach drop. Something had already started. The governments tried to keep up appearances. Public statements were calm and confident. "Our fleet is safe. There's no cause for concern." But inside the control centers, fear was spreading. In the Pacific Command Base, Admiral Keon Armitage, leader of the Ninth Fleet, had sent one last encrypted transmission before going silent. The message was brief but haunting. "They're not ships. They're alive." After that, nothing. The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Back on Earth, the upper brass buried the message, labeling it classified. They didn't want panic. But some within the agency began to whisper. Who were they? What did he mean by alive? Adrian somehow managed to get a copy of the encrypted message through one of his old friends in the military science division. When he read those words, he felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Alive. Whatever those 9 objects were, they weren't machines. At least not in the way humans understood machines. He started piecing together what he could. If the countdown had been a warning, maybe the fleet's silence meant humanity had ignored it. Maybe those things had come closer because the signal had stopped. Around the same time, strange things started happening on Earth again. Deep-sea sensors picked up low-frequency vibrations coming from beneath the ocean, sounds that didn't match any natural pattern. Air traffic controllers reported seeing flashes at the edge of the atmosphere, then losing radar contact for brief moments. Even the magnetic field around the planet started showing odd fluctuations. The data was brushed aside as solar anomalies, but Adrian saw the patterns. They weren't random. They were pulsing, like a heartbeat, the same rhythm as the original countdown signal. He felt sick realizing it. The signal hadn't just been coming to Earth. It was also echoing from it, as if something inside the planet was now responding. He tried again to warn the Council, but this time his access was blocked. His reports were flagged and deleted before they even reached the top. It was clear. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. That night he recorded a video message on his personal console, a message he never sent. "If anyone ever finds this," he said quietly, "the Ninth Fleet isn't lost. It's waiting. And whatever's out there, it knows we're here." He paused, staring into the camera. The countdown wasn't a threat. It was a deadline, and we already crossed it. By the time summer arrived, the world seemed normal again. Cities were loud, markets busy, people cheerful. But above the calm surface, Earth's defenses were slowly breaking apart. Communication satellites started malfunctioning. Orbital drones lost synchronization. A quiet panic began behind closed doors. In one of those meetings, President Ana Rivera demanded answers from the Defense Council. "Where's the Ninth Fleet?" she asked sharply. No one in the room could meet her eyes. Finally, one officer spoke. "Ma'am, we don't know." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. It had been nearly 6 weeks since the last message from the fleet. Every attempt to contact them failed. Drones sent to investigate never returned. It was as if an invisible wall surrounded the outer system, blocking everything. Still, the official statement to the public remained the same. All operations are stable. Adrian watched those press conferences from his apartment, feeling both angry and helpless. He knew the truth was being buried. Humanity wasn't preparing for what was coming. It was pretending it didn't exist. Then one night, a quiet alert flashed on his old workstation. The observatory's automated system had picked up something near the orbit of Mars, faint energy spikes forming a pattern. Adrian's heart raced. He rushed to decode it. The pattern looked familiar. It was the same countdown sequence, but this time reversed. Instead of counting down, it was counting up. He stared at the numbers on his screen, realizing what it meant. The signal wasn't gone. It had simply shifted to a new phase. Whatever the countdown had been measuring before, it was now recording progress. Something had begun. He felt cold all over. He immediately sent the data to every contact he still had. But only one replied. A short message from a defense technician he barely knew. "They told us to delete everything. They said it's classified under Operation Silence. Whatever you found, forget it, or you'll disappear like the rest." Days later, news broke quietly that the Ninth Fleet was now officially listed as missing. No rescue mission was launched. No explanation was given. The world barely noticed, but those who worked in space command centers began quitting their jobs one by one. Something about the empty transmissions, the ghostly radar echoes, and the vanishing ships made people nervous. It didn't feel like a normal blackout anymore. It felt like the calm before something terrible. Adrian looked again at the 9 dots on his board. He could feel it. They were closer now. Somewhere out there, beyond human eyes, those 9 things were moving through the black, silent, waiting, and Earth, busy celebrating its ordinary days, had no idea how close it was to the edge. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. Outside, the night sky sparkled peacefully. People looked up and saw beauty. Adrian looked up and saw warning signs. He whispered softly to himself, "The storm's coming. They just don't see it yet." Somewhere in the vast cold dark beyond Neptune, something stirred, and humanity's silence was about to cost it everything. The day began like any other. The sun rose over the Pacific, bright and golden, and the world woke up to another ordinary morning. People went to work, children rushed to school, traffic filled the streets. No one knew that this would be the last normal sunrise Earth would ever see. At the United Earth Space Center in Geneva, Dr. Adrian Holt sat by a monitor with a cup of cold coffee in his hand. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His eyes were red, his voice was tired, but his mind was restless. He kept staring at a small flashing dot on his screen, the reversed countdown. For weeks it had been climbing slowly like a meter filling up, and that morning it had reached its peak. He didn't know what would happen next, but something inside him told him that the time had come. Outside, the world looked peaceful. There was no sign of danger. But 4.3 billion kilometers away, beyond the orbit of Neptune, 9 enormous objects began to move. At exactly 9:12 a.m. Earth time, every major satellite orbiting the planet detected a sudden spike in electromagnetic activity. The readings shot off the charts. Operators thought it was a solar flare at first, a big one. They rushed to alert the global network, but before they could send the warning, their screens went black. Communication satellites blinked out one after another. GPS systems collapsed. Air traffic controllers lost contact with hundreds of flights at once. Within minutes, entire countries were cut off from each other. At the Space Center, alarms blared. Adrian ran to the control deck where engineers and analysts were shouting over each other. "It's not solar interference," one of them yelled. "The energy source is artificial." Adrian stared at the data streams flashing across the main screen. The energy signatures matched the coordinates of the Ninth Fleet's last known position. His throat went dry. "They're here," he whispered. The director turned to him sharply. "What did you say?" Adrian's voice was calm but trembling. "They're not gone. The Ninth Fleet, they're coming back." A few minutes later, the first flash appeared in the sky, over the Pacific Ocean near the International Orbital Path. A blinding light burst through the clouds, brighter than the sun for a moment. Every satellite camera that caught the image short-circuited. People on the western coasts of America and Asia looked up in shock, shielding their eyes. Then came the sound, a deep, rolling thunder that seemed to shake the sky itself. At first, people thought it was a meteor. Then another flash appeared, and another. Within minutes, there were dozens, streaks of burning light piercing through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire behind them. The air vibrated with a strange hum, like the sky itself was alive. Television networks around the world switched to live coverage. Reporters stood on rooftops pointing toward the glowing horizon. Social media exploded with videos and frantic messages. The world was watching, but no one understood what they were seeing. Then power grids began to fail. Entire cities went dark, one after another. Tokyo, San Francisco, Berlin, Karachi, Johannesburg, all plunged into silence. Hospitals, airports, and control towers lost power at the same time. The electromagnetic pulse from above had fried almost every circuit on Earth. Adrian stood frozen as he watched the world unravel in real time. "It's an attack," he whispered. "They're disabling everything before they strike." By noon, the world was in chaos. Planes dropped out of the sky. Communication lines were dead. The few military bases that still had backup power tried to reach the fleet, but their signals bounced back empty. In orbit, what was left of the human defense satellites recorded something terrifying. Massive structures descending through the upper atmosphere. They weren't meteors. They weren't ships as humans understood them. They looked like vast metallic organisms glowing faintly blue, moving in deliberate formation. Each one was the size of a city. The surviving analysts sent the data back to Earth before their systems failed completely. Adrian stared at the images in disbelief. The formations were identical to the 9 dots from the original signal. The same pattern, the same alignment. They had arrived. Around 2 p.m., Earth's defense systems tried to fight back. Automated drones launched from underground bases and space outposts. A few energy cannons fired from high-altitude platforms, but their attacks did nothing. The alien structures didn't even react. Instead, they emitted a wave, invisible but deadly. Within seconds, every defense mechanism on the planet was disabled. Drones crashed, missiles exploded mid-air, and orbital stations disintegrated into dust. Then came the second wave. From each massive object, smaller units detached and began descending toward the surface. They looked like liquid metal, reshaping themselves as they moved through the clouds. Wherever they landed, they released bursts of bright plasma that consumed everything. Buildings, vehicles, people. The world burned in silence. No sound came from the explosions. The plasma didn't behave like normal fire. It devoured energy, not matter. It shut down everything electrical and drained all remaining power sources. Within hours, humanity's proud civilization had turned into a planet of shadows and smoke. At the Space Center, chaos had taken over. People screamed as the lights flickered and the ground trembled. Adrian rushed through the corridors, clutching his data drive. He had one goal: to save the record of what was happening, so someone someday would know the truth. Outside the glass windows, he could see strange blue lights moving across the sky. Silent, smooth, terrifying. A fellow scientist, Dr. Joe, grabbed his arm. "We have to leave, Adrian. The emergency transport is ready." He shook his head. "If we leave now, we lose all the data. Everything we worked for will vanish." She looked at him, eyes wide with fear. "If we stay, we die." The building shook violently. Part of the roof collapsed. The decision was made for them. They ran. Across the planet, the same story unfolded in every city. People tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run. The alien plasma waves weren't destroying the planet. They were disabling it, shutting down everything that made human life modern. Within 12 hours, Earth was silent. No internet. No communication. No power. The only light that remained came from the burning skies and the strange, glowing ships hovering silently above the clouds. Adrian and a few survivors made it to an underground bunker near the Alps. It was one of the few places shielded from electromagnetic interference. From there, they could still receive faint signals from deep space. As they sat in the dim light of emergency lamps, Adrian played the latest transmission from the outer network. It was a static-filled message, distorted but still understandable. It came from a reconnaissance probe near Jupiter. Through the noise, a voice spoke. Fleet 9, not destroyed. Repeating, not destroyed. Adrian froze. His hands trembled as he replayed the message again and again. The Ninth Fleet wasn't gone, but if they weren't destroyed, then what had happened to them? He looked at the glowing blue sky above and felt a chill deep in his bones. The shapes he saw moving through the atmosphere, their formation, their movement, it was familiar. It was human, he whispered to himself. Oh God, it's them. The truth hit him like a wave of ice. The Ninth Fleet hadn't been wiped out. They had been changed, assimilated. Whatever these entities were, they had taken control of the fleet, turning Earth's own defenders into instruments of destruction. That's why the energy signatures matched. That's why the attack seemed so precise. It was human technology, fused with something far beyond human understanding. The realization crushed him. Humanity hadn't just been attacked, it had been used. He closed his eyes, his chest heavy with guilt. The countdown hadn't been a warning from invaders. It had been a final message, a chance to stop this before it began. And they had ignored it. Now it was too late. Hours passed. The survivors in the bunker listened to the distant rumble of explosions above. The ground trembled now and then like thunder rolling under the earth. Dr. Joe sat beside Adrian, whispering, "Do you think they'll stop?" He didn't answer. He looked at the small monitor showing the outside world through a remote camera. The sky was a strange shade of blue now, filled with streaks of light. The alien ships weren't destroying the planet outright. They were covering it, spreading across continents like a silent web. Adrian finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "They won't stop until everything is dark." She looked at him. "Then what do we do?" He turned to her, his eyes hollow but determined. "We survive, we record. We make sure someone knows what really happened. Because this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." By midnight, the blue lights faded into the clouds and silence fell across the world again. The attack had ended as suddenly as it began, but Earth was no longer the same. The cities that once shone like stars were now lifeless shells. The oceans were still. The air was heavy with ash. Humanity's mighty networks, its satellites, defenses, and technology were gone. Only a few survivors remained underground, staring at the dead sky, wondering what would come next. Adrian sat in front of a dim screen, writing a single sentence in his log file. The day the sky opened, Earth learned what silence truly means. He saved the file and closed his eyes. The world above might have fallen, but deep inside, a spark still survived, the spark of understanding, of hope, of the human will to endure. And far above the quiet planet, 9 ghostly ships drifted slowly in orbit, the same ships that once protected Earth. Now they watched it in silence. Adrian Holt hadn't slept properly in weeks. The world outside his small underground lab in the Andes had changed forever. What was once a planet full of cities and noise had turned into scattered pockets of survivors hiding from a threat they could barely understand. The alien strike had left Earth half crippled, with its defense systems down and its communications network in ruins. Yet even in this chaos, there were people like Adrian who refused to give up. The base where he worked wasn't big. It was built inside a hollowed-out mountain, a mix of concrete tunnels, flickering lights, and humming machines. Around him were scientists, engineers, and former military officers, all united under one goal: to find answers. They called their group the Unified Earth Survival Initiative. The name sounded grand, but everyone inside knew the truth. They were desperate people holding on to the last thin thread of hope. Every day, Adrian woke before dawn, though there was no sunlight underground. He'd sit at his station, surrounded by monitors showing static or broken signals, and replay the fragments of alien transmissions they had captured. The sounds were haunting. Low pulses, deep vibrations, sometimes followed by strange echoes that almost resembled voices. At first he thought he was imagining things, but soon others began to hear them too. It wasn't random noise. It was communication. One afternoon, while Adrian was studying the alien fragments, Commander Elena Rios came into the lab. She had once been part of the Orbital Defense Force before everything went dark. Her uniform was old and torn, but she still carried herself like a soldier. "Holt," she said, dropping a metal container on his desk. "We found this near the coast, buried under wreckage. It looks alien." Inside the container was a black metallic shard, smooth and cold to the touch. It gave off a faint hum like it was alive. The engineers quickly placed it under scanners, and what they discovered left everyone silent. The molecular structure of the shard wasn't completely foreign. It shared traces of materials that Earth scientists had already been experimenting with years ago. That realization struck Adrian like lightning. Someone on Earth had been developing technology similar to what the aliens used. This wasn't a coincidence. "Are you saying," Elena asked, her voice low, "that these things might be connected to us?" Adrian hesitated before answering. "Not exactly connected," he said, "but maybe influenced. Maybe we were working on something that shouldn't have been touched." That night, the base gathered for an emergency meeting. Screens lit up with faces from other surviving labs around the world. Some in caves, some in bunkers, some operating from abandoned space stations. They compared notes and data, and a disturbing pattern emerged. The alien weapons, their flight patterns, even their targeting systems had one strange similarity. They were reacting to energy frequencies used by Earth's own defense systems. It was almost as if the aliens had been taught how to fight humans by humans themselves. The theory sounded insane, but the evidence was undeniable. Someone somewhere had been in contact with them long before the strike began. Adrian couldn't sleep after that. He spent hours staring at the data, going over every log and report he could find. His thoughts kept returning to one thing, the countdown signal that had started it all. What if the message wasn't a threat but a warning? What if the aliens weren't attacking out of hate or greed, but because of something humans had done? Days later, a storm hit the Andes. Communication with other bases went down again, and the wind howled through the mountain tunnels. During that time, Adrian made a discovery that changed everything. The alien shard on his desk began to glow faintly. Its hum grew louder, pulsing in rhythm with the storm outside. When he connected it to his monitor, lines of strange symbols appeared on the screen. The symbols shifted, forming a pattern that looked like a message. He quickly recorded it and ran the translation algorithm. The words that appeared made his heart stop. "Cleansing initiated. Violation confirmed." He called Elena immediately. Within minutes, the entire base gathered around the monitor. "What does that mean?" one of the engineers asked. "Cleansing of what?" Adrian swallowed hard. "Us," he said quietly. "They think we violated something, some kind of universal rule. And now they're cleansing the system." The room fell silent. Outside, thunder roared through the mountain. Over the next few days, more fragments of similar messages were found across other labs. They all contained words like purge, correction, and containment. The aliens weren't invaders in the traditional sense. They were enforcers of a law that humanity didn't even know existed. The countdown had been an ultimatum. Stop whatever experiment Earth had been conducting or face destruction. And Earth had ignored it. Elena slammed her fist on the table one night. "We didn't deserve this," she said bitterly. "Whatever those people did, they doomed us all." Adrian nodded slowly. "The question is, what exactly did they do?" Weeks turned into months. The survivors struggled to keep hope alive while the alien presence in the skies grew stronger. Strange black drones floated high in orbit, monitoring everything below. Cities that tried to rebuild were often struck again without warning, as if the aliens were ensuring humanity stayed broken. Then came another shock. A scout team exploring what was left of a military bunker in Australia found a log file labeled Project Helios. The project was top secret, connected to a coalition of world governments. The log described experiments with energy sources capable of bending matter and manipulating gravity, something called stellar core replication. In simpler words, Earth scientists had tried to create a miniature version of a star's energy. It worked briefly, but what they didn't realize was that the experiment had emitted a pulse powerful enough to reach beyond the solar system. That pulse, Adrian realized, was the first signal that drew the aliens' attention. Humanity hadn't been attacked randomly. It had triggered the event itself. When Elena heard this, she didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "So we called them here. We brought this on ourselves." Adrian could only nod. "And the Ninth Fleet," he added, "wasn't sent to defend Earth. It was sent to cover up what happened." The truth began to spread among the survivors, whispered from base to base. People's anger turned to disbelief, then to guilt. Humanity hadn't been innocent. It had trespassed into something beyond comprehension. Still, there was one question no one could answer. If the aliens' goal was to cleanse, why hadn't they destroyed Earth completely? Why strike then stop? Adrian had a theory. "They're testing us," he said. "They want to see if we'll learn or repeat our mistakes." Late one night, as the storm outside faded and silence filled the tunnels, Adrian sat alone at his desk, watching the alien shard glow again. He placed his hand over it, feeling the faint warmth beneath the metal. "If you're listening," he whispered softly, "we understand now. Just tell us what to do." No answer came. Only a steady hum filled the air. Somewhere deep in space, hidden beyond the planets, something stirred in response, a distant flicker of light, as if another countdown had just begun. And Adrian knew, in that moment, that Earth's story wasn't over. It was only waiting for the next. The transmission came from deep space, faint, broken, and almost lost in the background noise. But to Adrian Holt, it was a miracle. For months, the Earth had been living in silence, its skies watched by cold alien eyes, its communication systems mostly dead. But this signal, it was human. He was sitting in the dim control room of the Andes base when he first caught it. A small light blinked on his monitor, a weak signal from somewhere near Jupiter. At first he thought it was interference, but when he adjusted the frequency, the pattern became clear. It was the code used by Earth's Ninth Fleet, the same fleet that everyone believed had been wiped out near Neptune months ago. Adrian's heart pounded. He called Commander Elena Rios immediately. Within minutes, the entire base was alive again, people rushing, screens lighting up, technicians plugging in cables and realigning antennas. For the first time in months, there was a trace of hope. "If this is really the Ninth Fleet," Elena said, staring at the flickering data on the main screen, "then maybe we're not finished yet." The transmission was weak and broken, full of static. But one line repeated over and over, a message in the fleet's emergency code. "We remain." Coordinates follow? It didn't make sense. How could they remain? The last contact with the fleet had shown massive explosions around Neptune. Yet here was their signal drifting from Jupiter's shadow. Adrian felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. A few days later, the Unified Earth Survival Initiative sent a small salvage ship, Aurora, to investigate. It was one of the last functioning vessels capable of deep space travel, repaired with scavenged parts and run by a small crew of volunteers. The mission was simple: follow the signal, find what was left of the Ninth Fleet, and bring back anything useful: information, technology, or survivors. The journey took weeks. The Aurora moved silently through the cold emptiness, its crew watching the dark side of Jupiter grow larger and larger on their screens. Adrian stayed in contact with them from the base, his voice echoing softly through the static. "Remember," he told them, "if something feels wrong, come back. Don't try to be heroes." But heroes were exactly what they were becoming. When the Aurora finally reached the coordinates, they saw something that none of them would ever forget. Floating there, half hidden in the darkness, was the Ninth Fleet, or what was left of it. Dozens of massive warships, silent and cold, drifting together like a graveyard frozen in time. The ships were perfectly aligned, almost in formation, though no one was controlling them. "By God," whispered Captain Lena Voss of the Aurora. "They're just waiting." The fleet looked lifeless, but their lights flickered faintly like dying embers. The Aurora approached slowly, engines quiet, weapons on standby. The silence of space felt heavy, pressing against every breath. When they finally docked with the flagship Odyssey, Captain Lena led a small team inside. The airlock opened with a low hiss, and the corridor beyond was pitch dark. The walls were covered with strange marks, almost like burn patterns, but organic, twisting like veins. "Where's the crew?" one of the engineers whispered. They moved deeper inside, their flashlights cutting through the dust. Everything was still. Control panels powered down, chairs overturned, personal belongings floating in zero gravity. It was like the people had simply vanished in the middle of their duties. Then they reached the command deck. The captain's chair was empty, but the main console still had power. A blinking message waited on the screen. Do not attempt recovery. We are no longer what you think we are. Lena called Adrian over the comms. We found something. A log file. Sending now. Back on Earth, Adrian and Elena watched as the data began to upload. The video logs were distorted, but the sound was clear enough to understand the last moments of the fleet. The first recording showed Admiral Keon Armitage, his face pale and tense. We encountered a formation of unknown vessels near Neptune's orbit, he said. At first, they kept their distance. Then they emitted an energy pulse. It passed through our shields like air. Systems began shutting down. Crew members changed. He paused, his eyes dark. It's not a weapon. It's a simulation. They're not killing us. They're converting us. The screen flickered. The next recording showed chaos. Alarms blaring, lights flashing, people screaming. The crew's bodies began to glow faintly, their eyes empty. Then one by one, they stopped moving. Admiral Armitage's voice returned, now calm and almost mechanical. The fleet is no longer human. We are part of them now. Tell Earth. It's too late. The video ended. Silence filled the base. Elena rubbed her forehead, her voice shaking.
They didn't destroy the Ninth Fleet, she whispered.
They took it. Adrian stared at the screen. And now they're using it against us. It made terrible sense. The precision of the alien strikes, the way they targeted specific defense grids, only the Ninth Fleet could have known those coordinates. Earth hadn't been fighting an alien army alone. It had been fighting its own soldiers, turned into extensions of the invader's will. Still, something in the log bothered Adrian. The Admiral had sounded aware even after assimilation began. It was like a small part of his mind was fighting back. Maybe, he thought, the fleet wasn't completely lost. That night, as the survivors gathered around the monitors, Adrian replayed the alien countdown message once again. For months it had been a mystery, a riddle no one could solve. But now, he heard something different in the rhythm, a faint echo that matched the Ninth Fleet's signal. He leaned forward, heart racing. They're linked, he murmured. The fleet and the aliens, and the connection isn't just physical. It's in the signal itself, Elena frowned. Are you saying they're communicating through that frequency? Yes, Adrian said. And if we can reach the fleet through it, maybe we can break their control. The idea was risky, maybe even impossible, but it was the only spark of hope they had. They would try to send a counter-signal, something that could interfere with the alien control network, maybe even free whatever was left of the human consciousness inside the Ninth Fleet. For the next several days, the base worked non-stop. Engineers calibrated old transmitters, scientists studied the alien shard, and Adrian built a sequence that mirrored the alien's frequency pattern. It was dangerous. If done wrong, it could attract them instead of disrupting them, but they had no other choice. Finally, after countless sleepless nights, the signal was ready. They aimed their antennas toward Jupiter's orbit and transmitted the pulse. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the readings began to change. The Ninth Fleet's ships, still drifting in space, started to move, their lights flickering like hearts beating again. On board the Aurora, Captain Lena reported in. They're waking up, she said, her voice trembling. All of them. The fleet's engines powered on, and the ships turned, not toward Earth, but toward the alien formation beyond Neptune. For a few breathtaking minutes, it looked as if the Ninth Fleet had returned, as if the humans within them were fighting back. Adrian watched the radar feed in disbelief. They're responding. They're actually... His words were cut short as the signal spiked violently. The screens flashed red. One by one, the fleet's ships began to overload. A moment later, massive explosions filled the void near Jupiter, silent but blinding bursts of light. Lena's final transmission came through the static. They chose to end it themselves. They didn't want to be used anymore. And then, the signal went dead. Back at the base, no one spoke. The Ninth Fleet was gone for good, but this time by their own choice. It was tragic, but somehow it also felt noble. As if the last remnants of humanity in those soldiers had made their stand, refusing to serve as tools for the invaders. Adrian sat silently for a long time, staring at the black screens. He whispered softly, "You didn't vanish. You saved us." Outside, the wind howled through the mountain passes, and far above in the dark sky, the alien ships shifted their positions. For now, they stayed still, watching. But deep in Adrian's heart, he knew this was not the end. The aliens had lost their greatest weapon, but they hadn't gone away. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, the true war was only waiting to begin. The loss of the Ninth Fleet changed everything. For months, the survivors on Earth lived under a sky that no longer felt like their own. The alien ships still hung above the atmosphere, dark, silent, and unmoving, like a warning written across the stars. No one knew if they were waiting or watching. But everyone knew one thing: they weren't gone. Adrian Holt sat in the dim control room of the underground base, staring at the screens filled with static. The silence felt heavier than ever. Since the explosion near Jupiter, there had been no new transmissions, no signals from the aliens, and no messages from space. It was as if the universe had gone completely still. Outside, what was left of humanity struggled to rebuild. Cities had become quiet shelters. People traded what little food and energy they could find. Children grew up hearing stories about the day the sky burned, and most adults avoided talking about the past. But in secret, the Unified Earth Survival Initiative kept working, studying, repairing, and trying to understand the alien network. They knew this silence was not peace. It was a pause before something greater. One night, Adrian received a faint ping on his monitor. At first, he thought it was a glitch, but the signal pattern was familiar, a steady rhythm that made his chest tighten. He had heard it before. It was part of the alien countdown sequence, only this time the tone was different, slower, almost like an echo. He leaned closer, heart pounding. "Elena," he called out. "You need to see this." Commander Elena Rios rushed into the room, her face pale. The screen displayed a strange series of pulses, repeating every few seconds. The numbers on the side flickered, forming a sequence that looked like coordinates. Not in deep space this time, but inside Earth's orbit. "What does it mean?" she asked quietly. Adrian hesitated. "It means they're sending something here, or they're calling something back." The base went on high alert. Within hours, satellite fragments and old telescopes were pointed toward the sky. They detected movement, dozens of small objects entering Earth's atmosphere, burning faintly like meteors. But they weren't meteors. They were controlled. The objects fell into the oceans, the deserts, and the frozen lands. None of them exploded. They simply disappeared beneath the surface. The readings showed weak energy signatures, but nothing harmful. Still, it was enough to make every survivor feel that familiar chill of fear again. Elena turned to Adrian. "They're planting something. Seeds, machines, Gwand, whatever it is, it's starting again." He nodded grimly. "And this time they're not attacking. They're waiting for us to respond." Over the next few weeks, strange phenomena began to appear around the world. In the oceans, currents shifted unnaturally. In deserts, the sand started to form perfect circular patterns overnight. And in the forests, trees emitted faint blue light. Nature itself seemed to be reacting to something unseen. It wasn't long before the survivors started whispering again. Some saying the world was healing, others claiming it was transforming. But Adrian and the scientists knew the truth. The alien cleansing wasn't finished. It was evolving. One day, while analyzing the oceanic signals, Adrian made a shocking discovery. The energy patterns coming from the deep ocean matched the ones recorded from the Ninth Fleet before its destruction. Somehow, fragments of the fleet's signal, or perhaps consciousness, had been absorbed into the alien network that now surrounded the planet. He recorded his findings in a quiet, tired voice. "They didn't die in vain," he said. "They became part of the system, maybe even a shield between us and what's really coming." Elena looked at him, frowning. "A shield? Against what?" Adrian pointed at the monitor. "Against them. Against something worse." That night, power went out across the base. Backup systems flickered, and the emergency lights turned the corridors red. For a few seconds, all communication was lost. Then through the static on one of the monitors, a voice spoke, calm, mechanical, and eerily familiar. "Your world was warned. The Ninth Fleet is only the beginning." The voice was synthetic, but there was something human buried deep within it. Adrian froze. "That's Armitage," he whispered. "The Admiral of the Ninth Fleet." The room went silent. The message repeated once, then vanished. The lights came back and the systems returned to normal. But no one could shake the feeling that they had just been contacted by something caught between human and alien. something that shouldn't exist. Elena slammed her fist on the console. They're using him. They're using what's left of them to talk to us. Adrian stared at the dark screen, his mind racing. No, he said slowly. Maybe it's not them using him. Maybe it's him trying to warn us again. The next few days were filled with unease. The survivors across the world began reporting strange lights in the sky, moving in patterns too perfect to be natural. The alien ships that had been still for months began to shift, aligning into a ring formation around Earth, one that looked almost like a cage. Everyone feared it was the end. But Adrian saw something else. He noticed that the movement of the ships perfectly matched the same pattern as the original countdown, the one that had started everything years ago. This isn't an attack, he said finally. It's another signal. They're giving us one last chance. Elena looked at him, confused. A chance for what? To respond, he said. The first countdown was a warning. We ignored it. This one, maybe it's a test. They want to see if we've learned. He proposed a bold idea to send a new message back into space. Not a threat, not a defense signal, but a simple response of peace and understanding. A transmission that showed Earth was done fighting, done experimenting, and willing to listen. At first, no one agreed. It sounded foolish, trying to reason with beings who had wiped out billions. But Adrian believed it was the only way. If we keep responding with fear, he said softly, they'll keep cleansing us. But if we show them something different, maybe they'll see we're worth saving. So they did it. The surviving bases around the world worked together for the first time in years to amplify a single transmission. It carried no weapons data, no coordinates, no demands. Just a human voice, Adrian's, speaking in the simplest, most honest tone he could. This is Earth, he said into the microphone. We made mistakes. We were reckless. But we've learned. We don't want war. We only want a chance to start again. The signal was sent into the void. For hours, nothing happened. Then slowly, the ring of alien ships began to glow. The sky turned bright with soft blue light, as if dawn had arrived across the entire planet at once. People everywhere stopped what they were doing and looked up, frightened but unable to look away. The light pulsed gently, once, twice, 3 times, and then the ships started to drift apart. One by one, they disappeared into the darkness of space, vanishing without a sound. For the first time in years, Earth's skies were clear. Adrian and Elena stood outside the base looking up at the stars. The air was cold, the world quiet. Do you think it's over? Elena asked. Adrian smiled faintly. Maybe for now, he said. But I don't think they were our enemies. I think they were our teachers. Elena frowned. Teachers? For what? For survival, Adrian said softly. For humility. Maybe they were reminding us that we're not the only ones who live in this universe, and that power without wisdom always comes with a price. In the following months, Earth began to heal. The strange lights in the forests faded and the seas grew calm again. Crops began to grow where nothing had survived before. It was as if the planet itself had been reset, cleansed, but also renewed. Yet every now and then, Adrian would look at the stars and see faint glimmers, distant lights moving in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. He would smile and whisper, "We hear you," because deep down, he knew the truth and the aliens had not left completely. They were still watching, still waiting, to see if humanity would remember the lesson of the Ninth Fleet, or repeat its mistakes. And somewhere in the far dark reaches of space, a single voice whispered through the static, half human, half something else. Earth has chosen. Let us hope they choose wisely.